So I'm going to say a few things that might scare you a little bit, but don't worry, there's solutions to everything I'm going to say. Right now, everybody in this room, vast majority of you, are aging much quicker than you should. And basically, we're all born with an expiration date. But the good news is that expiration date could be moved back. Aging is the most important factor, the most prominent factor in age-related diseases in general. All the diseases we start to experience later on in life, as far as high blood pressure, cholesterol, it's all related to the aging process. So if we can control aging, we can decrease the potential of getting those age-related diseases, as well as the magnitude of those age-related diseases. We'd like to have the cognitive abilities, thought processes, memory, equal to a 20-year-old or maybe better in the next 2 decades. And that's usually even more people. So today I'm going to explain how I think we can do that right now. So let's get started. Aging is a disease, and right now the medical community is finally starting to think of aging as a disease. Your DNA controls your aging process, and you heard David speak about the epigenome, which I'm going to get into even a little bit deeper. Most importantly, your mindset will predict your future health. And this is kind of tying in some more of a holistic approach to things, but basically your mind helps reprogram your epigenome as well. Okay. So let me give you a little bit of my background. As a teenager, I was brought up in an area of New Jersey which was very Italian, blue collar. And the last thing I wanted to know, or actually come out, was the fact that I was interested at 15 in why we aged and how we aged. So I kind of kept it undercover. And my parents had said to me, you have to join this book club because you need to know about new things and new opinions, and neither one of my parents got out of high school. So I think they were kind of looking to me to take a step up. So I decided I would order the first book that they insisted I start to read something different. And the book that caught my attention in 1966 was this book, Prospects of Immortality. I read that book, and in that book it explained that there was this whole new science called cryonics. And it explained how we could freeze ourselves in the near future and wake up hundreds of years later with all the diseases that we may have had cured, because now science had advanced to the point where we had given them enough time to figure out those diseases. They could wake us up and we could live for hundreds of years. And frankly, I thought it was a great idea, but I never relished the thought of being frozen, either dead or alive. So it kind of really and I thought there had to be a better way than that. So it took about 50 years for me to figure that out. And I'll show you what I think is the better way in a minute. So fast forward, I went to medical school at Mount Sinai. I did my residencies. I became a plastic surgeon because I always loved how tissues were able to actually survive after we transplanted things. And I got super into this whole thing. And a good chunk of my practice initially was cosmetic surgery. And what really fascinated me was that different people age at different rates. And I would find somebody who was 60 who looked 15 years younger, and then I could make them look 10 or 15 years younger with my surgery. But then I had patients who were in their 40s who looked like they were 60. And it really started to help make me think, what is going on? But then suddenly I realized, after a number of years doing plastic surgery, that I was literally covering up what the aging process was creating. So I was an illusionist. I wasn't really any different than David Copperfield, because it was still happening beneath the skin, but we didn't know what it was. And that was about 25 years ago when I really started to shift my whole focus into aging. Could we slow it? Could we reverse it? And at that time, got involved with two other gentlemen who are still involved, and we created the first organization to study aging, the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And so that was how my journey began with, and where we've come now is just dramatically more and more amazing and exciting. Now, during my journey, in the past few years, I was lucky enough to actually get involved with Stephen Hawkins, who was the moderator for the Discovery Channel special on the stem cell universe. And what he brought out in the first part of that Discovery special was what was at that time thought was one of the major causes of aging, which still is, and the fact that there are a few of us who don't believe that process is something that can't be treated, and there's nothing we can do about it. So I'd like to run that video just briefly now. So one of the exciting things that most people don't know is that Stephen Hawking obviously was very ill for a long period of time. And one of the things that gave him the extra years he wanted was stem cell infusions. And that really wasn't something that was well known at the time. So most of us are aging, as David said, most of us, not the abundance group is a little, the Go Abundance group is a little bit of an outlier because you guys are focused on health and you're focused on quality of life. But most people we test are aging 3 to 7 years at least older than their biological age at the genetic level. So the secret here is, what can we do about this, right? And so we call this rapid aging syndrome. And if you're more than 5 to 6 years, actually more than 7 years older than your biological age, what does that mean? That's got to translate into something. What it means statistically, based on the latest research, is if you're 7 years older than your actual chronological age, the chances of you dying in the next 7 years are 56%. Your chances of you getting chronic diseases of aging are 54%. Now, if you could take a pill or something to reverse that, you'd be buying that medication immediately. On the other hand, if we can slow your epigenetic age down 7 years, those statistics are reversed. Your chances of dying are 56% less, and getting age-related diseases are 54% less. Most of the people we see who follow almost identical components that you saw David, plus stem cell collection, storage, and treatments, are aging 10 to 15 years younger than their biological age. So why does this all happen? I think let's take a deeper look into the mechanics of what goes on. You know, a number of years back, and this was about 5 or 6 years ago, a group of very prominent researchers got together, and I believe David was one of them, where everybody talked about what are the causes of cellular aging. And they came up with a number of key events that happen inside the cell that cause the, and I'm going to use this phrase, disease of aging. So the three most prominent causes and the things that we actually can control today, and I believe are about 90% the cause of the disease of aging, have to do with damage to our DNA, okay, have to do with increasing senescent cells, which we're going to get into detail in, and very importantly, stem cell exhaustion. Now, damage to our DNA basically is what causes or causes the genes that are involved in health and youth just to get ratcheted down. And the genes that are involved in age-related diseases ratcheted up. And that has to do with how they alter the epigenome, just like in that analogy you saw with David regarding the scratches on that CD. Senescent cells are things that happen to both our groups of our cells, our stem cells and body cells. As they age, they get damaged, and instead of being removed from the body, many of them don't. And what happens is they start to produce these inflammatory cytokines and other issues that cause your other cells to age quicker. Stem cell exhaustion. Now, this is a key point. Up until about 7 years ago, every human being on this planet was being held victim to the fact that each one of us are born with a fixed number of stem cells. Now, this is really important. If you have a crummy lifestyle, you don't exercise, you don't work out, you're eating at McDonald's, you have a lot of stress, you use that stem cell pool up dramatically quicker. Now, why is that important? It's because that's the source of your regenerative potential. It's an organ system. Just like your heart and your lungs are a system, we now look at your stem cell pool as your regenerative system. So some of you may be born with more stem cells than the next person in that seat. You have the potential in the past to have lived a little bit longer. But as soon as those stem cells are used up, and we're going to see this in a minute, you age quickly and you die. So up until 7 years ago, we were all held captive to that kind of limiting factor for health span and lifespan. Starting 7 years ago, I started to collect and store all three of the stem cell types that we have, and I'll explain those in a minute. And I started to give those back to patients once a year, 200 million of those cells. Because every year you live, you lose the number and function of those cells. And to my amazement, 7 years ago, I called this a white blood cell transfusion, because then we weren't even sure what stem cells were doing. People started to feel better. They started to look better. They had more energy. And frankly, even their biochemistry that we were looking at started to get better. So this was really the beginning of this whole concept, is how important were stem cells? Okay. So let's take a trip into the body and take a look. We have 100 trillion cells in each one of our human bodies. Each one of these cells contain 6 feet of DNA. And what you're going to see here now is on these little waving tails are the proteins being formed from the DNA that is programmed to make those proteins. Proteins make tissues, tissues makes organs, and organs make your body. We're going to take a deep dive through a nuclear pore and go right into the nucleus, the control center for our DNA. And these are our chromosomes, okay? And these chromosomes now tightly wrap DNA, as you saw with David's lecture. The little round protective things are called histones, which help protect our DNA. And here is our DNA. And right there, you just saw the cause of aging, okay? One of the major causes. Damage to our DNA, changes to our epigenome. Now, DNA can be damaged in multiple ways: insertions, deletions, translocations, all these other things that can happen to mix up our genetic software. And today, I'm going to introduce something interesting, because even some of the top researchers in the world are now thinking of DNA as our genetic software. And we'll come back to that in a minute. So what happens, the next key thing is the accumulation of these senescent cells, okay? Let's take a peek. So as I said, we're all born with a fixed number of stem cells, and whatever causes those stem cells to get used up quicker or damaged, we don't want. So in the last 5 or 6 years, the research has shown that in about our 40s, we start to collect significant numbers of these senescent cells. Again, they're called zombie cells. Why? Because the neighboring cells around these cells get damaged from the products they produce, and then those cells become zombie cells, and they start damaging other cells around them until your body starts to accumulate these in such large numbers that they cause your healthy cells, your stem cells and body cells, to age quicker. Now, initial studies in animals using these compounds called senolytics, or things that get rid of senescent cells, have actually shown that the animals that are treated with these compounds can live up to 40% longer than their maximum lifespan. 40%, just removing these cells can make that much of a difference. So this started to pique my interest a number of years ago, and following the literature, we saw initial studies being published using 2 nutraceuticals and 1 medication for a 5-day period only. And it made a significant difference in these accumulating numbers of these senescent cells. Okay, so basically what happens is, as we start from toddlers to adolescents to full mature adults, we use about 60 to 70% of the stem cells we're born with. Now that's called positive aging. Okay, it's kind of a misnomer, but we need to use those stem cells to turn into mature adults so we can propagate the human species. Once we hit our early to mid 40s, the numbers of those stem cells start to decline dramatically. Senescent cells start to appear and accumulate dramatically. Our genetic material, our DNA, has a program that is supposed to repair the damage inside each one of those 100 trillion cells. And that genetic program becomes faulty. We can no longer repair the damage that's occurring at the right rate. So both our stem cells, our body cells, and even our DNA itself is not able to maintain its ability to stay optimally healthy. So what happens is simple. The green graph shows when you hit your early mid-40s, your total stem cell number starts to decline. You hit your 40s, you start to accumulate your senescent cells. Now, you may not even feel the difference initially, but what's going to happen is this. The crossover point. When those 2 graphs meet, you age quickly, you get chronic diseases of aging very quickly, and you die quickly. Now, all of us have been to some social affairs where, we haven't seen people for a while, and somebody will walk in the room and you'll go, oh my God, is that really them? They look terrible. They age terrible. You just witnessed a crossover point. And that's scary. So let's go a little bit more into the cell concepts and what is really driving a lot of the regenerative potential in our bodies. We have 2 main groups of cells. We have our somatic cells, which are what you're seeing, what you're feeling with. They keep us healthy. They keep our bodies functioning. Ideally, we do sports. Our adult stem cells are the regenerative reserve. If we had no adult stem cells in our body, we would live probably no longer than a year or so. Because every time your body cells get damaged, trauma, a general aging process, a disease, those adult stem cells have to go to replace your body cells. And if you're using up those stem cells quicker, like most bodybuilders do, and I tell you, I've had a lot of patients who are bodybuilders. What's interesting is they look great initially, but they have used up so much of their stem cell reserves to build that muscle that their tank is almost empty. And most of them get chronic diseases of aging early, and most of them die early. So from the stem cell point of view, we have 3 main types of stem cells. And this isn't hard stuff to remember. We have hematopoietic stem cells. So hematopoietic stem cells form the basis of our immune system. And what happens as we age? Our immune system gets weaker. We succumb to viruses, bacteria, or even cancer. So one of the reasons why we replace hematopoietic stem cells in everybody every year. Endothelial progenitor cells, what are they for? Well, when we're young, in our 30s, 40s, and even early 50s, we have plenty of these. They repair your blood vessels. They grow new blood vessels. And they maintain your blood vessels. So what happens as we age? We get a heart attack, poor blood vessels. A stroke, poor blood vessels. We don't have enough blood flow to our extremities. We can't really exercise. we build up lactic acid quickly, and we don't have the endurance. Mesenchymal stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells, however you want to pronounce it. These are the source of our regenerative potential. Mesenchymal stem cells can morph into muscle, bone, cartilage, even brain tissue. As these start to decline, we notice our liver isn't working so well. Our kidneys aren't filtrating so well. Your heart can't really handle the exercise because that you used to, because those cells aren't there to go create new myocardium. So when we look at what nature has done for us as human beings, we realize at the peak of our health, in our 20s and 30s, we have phenomenal numbers of these with very little damage, which is why we're healthy, why we don't get sick, why our cognitive functions are better. Okay. Starting to get across how important these little guys are? Okay. Okay. So what do we want to do? Here's our goal. We want to be able to give you back your stem cells to keep that curve from going into a deep dive. And we want to take this senescent cell curve and flatten that out. And what does that all equate to? This. It's one of the key components that allow you to stay healthier longer and you age slower. Now, the other things that David spoke to are all essential as well. Now, I'm going to get into those and talk a little bit more about the clinical applications. And one of the reasons I love working with David is I can keep in contact with some of the most recent research and see how we might apply that clinically. And one of the good things about what we do is we are out of the country. Our clinic's out of the country. We can never do the things that we're doing in the United States and it's not because it's bad for people, it's because there's an environment here that keeps things with stem cells kind of in the back closet. And if you wanted to ask me why, I'll be honest with you. Big pharma, big insurance, put a tape over your check engine light. They don't want to treat the origin of the disease of aging. They want to treat symptoms. And they make their money selling drugs and conditioning physicians to tell you, take this medication, you'll feel better. You feel better, but you're not getting better. You're still aging. You're still having to deal with the disease process, okay? So our goal is to do this, along with some other things I'm going to show you in a minute. So everybody asks me, when is the best time to collect your stem cells? Well, the best time to collect your stem cells is what I did for my kids. They were 21, 22. That was like almost 10 years ago when we first started to look into this. So if you collect your stem cells at that age, they are pristine. The genes that are active are the ideal genes that keep you healthy for decades and decades. There's virtually no DNA damage to those cells. And those cells then can get put into cryopreservation, suspended animation, where they don't age. And decades later, those cells are available for you. Now, if you're in your 40s, or late 30s, 40s, even early 50s, those cells are still in a very good shape to preserve, because then they can be given back to you on a yearly basis and keep those curves from decreasing, but also to keep your levels of functional stem cells at a more ideal level so that you can experience what you did closer to when you were younger. So I'm being collected here. This was 9 years, 10 years ago. And I took my son to the office and I said to him, your birthday's next week, I'm giving you a present. I told him the night before and he goes, it's a surprise. He goes, Corvette? It's a new car? I go, no, you'll like this. This is even better. So he got to the office and I said, sit down, you're going to get your stem cells collected. And he went, I said, what a cheat. I said, wait a minute. You're going to thank me years from now. So he got his stem cells collected. His sister got his stem cells collected. It's probably the most important gift I could have given them, because the more science that comes out, the more we see that if you collect these cells at an ideal age, the benefits seem to be getting better and better and better, because you have a reserve of your optimal health sitting there to use when you need it or when you age. So one of the key things I wanted to mention was at our clinic, it's called the Regenerative Medicine Institute Clinic. We're in San Jose, Costa Rica because we can legally do all of these things that we couldn't do here in the US. We have our own laboratory where we manufacture, store, and take your cells, enhance them, and actually create other therapies that are based on stem cells in general. Again, we couldn't financially or time-wise afford to do that, or the rules in the US, again, are based on what the powers that be that control the health industry do. So let's take a look at this. I want you to do a little visual trip with me, an imagination journey. I love Ferraris. I don't have one, but I really like them. They are extremely beautiful machines artistically, and they're one of the most highly efficient machines designed. Now, the human body is one of the most unbelievable molecular genetic vehicles that has ever been designed. So I want you to come along with me on this little imagination journey. Let's say we walk into a Ferrari dealer, and there's a beautiful red Ferrari on that floor. And you go up to the salesman and you say, I want that car, and I want it now. And he tells you, okay, here's the price, and here's the paperwork, and get your insurance. But he doesn't tell you about any options on the car because you're assuming it has everything. The Ferrari you're buying with one tank of gas. But no one told you that. What's our body? Our body is an amazing molecular genetic vehicle. But up until about 7 years ago, everybody got one tank of gas. So now I take my Ferrari out and I drive it like crazy. I do 140 miles an hour. I decide to not really maintain that car, and I don't go too far. I make it a few months, and then the engine starts to it's not running ideally. I notice the tires are a little rough. Well, that's the analogy of today. Most of us drive our vehicle way too hard. We haven't spent the time to maintain it. We don't have the right diet and exercise. And most importantly, we use up our stem cell fuel very, very quickly. So imagine if we rewind this little visionary trip and we go back to the Ferrari dealer at the time we bought that car, and I say, by the way, sir, is there any options? And he goes to you, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, we can put a gas cap in your car. And you can go ahead and fill that tank up whenever you want, and you're going to go a lot further. Give me that one. And what else? Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you, we have a maintenance program too. We'll change the oil. We'll make sure all the belts and buzzers and whistles inside your engine are working great, particularly that dirty oil, senescent cells. And we'll make sure we register this at least 3 times a year to make sure that car goes for years. I would buy all those options. So this is an interesting analogy because frankly, up until 7 years ago, you couldn't fill your tank up. And 99.9% of people in the world don't even know they can do that now. So how does your DNA control your aging process? So what's interesting is recently I saw a quote from Bill Gates. And Bill Gates is an interesting guy. Some people love him, some people hate him. But he's a smart cookie. And DNA, he's quoted to say, is like a computer program, but far more advanced than any software we've ever created. And frankly, that's where we're all going at the level of clinical applications and treating the aging process as a disease. Because now we know how we can turn on certain regions of the DNA and turn off certain regions of the DNA, just like David was saying. So that science of reprogramming your DNA is called epigenetics, okay? So there are factors, and as David said too, he was great. He kind of teed me up for a lot of this. Your diet, your exercise, your mind state, your stress levels all alter your epigenome. They alter what genes get turned on and what genes get turned off. Now, I will briefly tell you something that really amazed me. And that was about 12 years ago, William Chiller from Stanford University decided to do something completely out of the box. He gave a group of people a tube of human DNA, and he had them hold it in their hands, and he had them think about somebody they hated, they couldn't stand. He measured the DNA, and the coils of that DNA they found completely tightened up. The genes weren't being exposed. He had them come back a week later, gave them another sample of DNA, and had them focus on the people they love. The DNA completely unwound. This is published in medical journals. How could that happen? Your mind, your emotions have a major impact on your health and activating, deactivating genes. And frankly, the third thing he did, which then really blew my mind, and again this is published, he put the DNA across the room and had them do the same experiment, same results. They weren't even touching the DNA, 10 feet away. So does our thoughts, our emotions, the people we live with, the things we read, all of the activity we do, what we see and hear all affect our brain, which affects our DNA. So if I had to draw a picture of this, how many people remember the Slinky toy? Maybe I'm too old. All right, good, that makes me feel better. So we all played with the Slinky toy, right? So what happens? Let's take a look at this. When those coils in the Slinky toy are open, the genes are exposed. They get activated. When the coils of that Slinky toy are coiled tight, the genes are deactivated. They're turned off or slowed down. So the secret is learning what combination of compounds or ingredients or lifestyle changes are the ones that open up the coil for the genes that are for health and close the coil that the genes are involved in aging. And we're pretty much there already with this. It's really about regulating our DNA at the correct regions on the genome. Does that make sense? That's not too hard to understand, right? So the question is, if DNA is our genetic software, who's the programmer? Well, every one of you are the programmers of your own DNA. And where does that information come from for you to optimally program? It comes from information from people like David, like myself, and reading about diet, nutrition, and other things that are part of the reprogramming process. Now, one of the most important things that I've been working on, and this is what garnered us actually 2 Nobel Prize nominations, was how can we take 70, 80-year-old stem cells, turn them back into 30-year-old stem cells? And my thought was, well, if nature knows how to do this, if nature knows how to create the perfect profile for people in their 20s and 30s, why can't we just mimic that? So I thought, how about if we took really super young cells, put them together with old cells, and do a certain little type of membrane where the compounds these young cells were producing would go through that membrane, limiting just certain ones, and would that reprogram the old cells? And guess what? No fancy removal, replacement of genes, but within 10 days, 80-year-old stem cells we then tested, they were producing the same proteins, the same numbers, colony-forming units. They lasted as long as the 30-year-old cells. We had completely reversed the aging process in old stem cells. Well, then I'm thinking, that's kind of interesting. Really? Was this the Holy Grail? No, but it was something that's very important. So we treated animals, and we found out these animals not only did better, they did something amazing. The stem cells that we had reprogrammed went to their bone marrow, and then they started to make copies of the young versions of themselves. So in essence, we had completely restored or reprogrammed the most important system, one of the most important systems in our body, the stem cell reserves. So not only could we give you back your stem cells, we could give you back younger versions of your stem cells. And that's where we are at the moment with some of the therapies we're doing. So with this information, I got an invitation from an interesting group to present this. It was the Vatican in Rome. And I'm thinking, they're going to kill me. They're going to I'm going to get up there and they're going to say, what the hell is this guy doing? Telling people to live longer and stem cells and all this other stuff. To my amazement, I get there and the Vatican is now donating $1 million+ a year to stem cell research. So I thought that was good. So I give my presentation. There's 50 cameras broadcasting this globally. And the cardinals, the whole host of all the cardinals are sitting there listening. And so I give my presentation. There's dead silence. And the head cardinal stands up and says, young man, why would you want to make people live so long? This is against God's will. So what do you do when the world's watching and you sit? First, I'm like, I didn't answer about 20 seconds. And I'm saying, if God, give me an answer, please. So I look above the cardinal's head, and there's a picture of Michelangelo in the Vatican auditorium. And suddenly it hits me. I said, Your Honor, Your Holiness, this is not about having people live longer. This is about having people stay healthier longer. Just imagine, Your Holiness, if Michelangelo had lived longer, what would he contributed to society, to humanity? What about Mozart? What about Botticelli? If they had just a few more years of healthy life, what would they have done to help us all, to improve our lives? Dead silence. And I go, uh-oh. I look at him, he looks at me, and I hear this. And then everybody, all the other cardinals start to clap. And I will tell you something. I never want to be in that position again. But I'll tell you, it was... But the point of the matter is, we're looking at extending healthy lifespan. We're not talking about, as David said, making people live to be 200, 300. Who knows? In the future, there might be the technologies, gene editing, CRISPR, Cas9, TALEN, all of these new gene editing tools we have. Maybe we can, and they already can epigenetically repair things and restore things without some of the things we're doing. But this is about taking you, giving you an extra few decades of super quality time, enhanced function, so you can do the things you love to do longer with the people you love. Okay. So let me give you an example. David showed you some of his results. This is a gentleman who started with us 6 months ago. Okay? He's 86. His epigenetic age was roughly 85. Okay? Now he's had his stem cells collected, stored. He's been on senolytics, senostatics, and I'll go over those in the whole protocol. 6 months later, his epigenetic age is 72. He's 15 years younger at the origin of the aging process, his genes. And this is what we're seeing, 10 years, 15 years younger. But that's just a number. We have everybody fill out a quality of life questionnaire. Actually, it's a special quality of life questionnaire we all use in research. When he rated himself, he said he had sleep apnea for the last 20 years. He had no longer sleep apnea. I don't know why. And sleep apnea supposedly doesn't go away. He has no sleep apnea. His functional levels, based on his own report card, so to speak, is dramatically better. Now, I've been on this program for a hair under 2 years. And I went from my normal epigenetic age for my birthday to 18 years younger. And it's been a little under 2 years. My functional level, I'm doing better than I've done for, I can't tell you, I don't know how long. And I'm going to be 71 in a few months, which most people find hard to believe, but that's okay. I don't mind. So controlling the critical pathways. We talked about these 3 pathways, okay? What are those pathways? The first one is DNA repair compounds, right? So what do we have for that? David spoke about MSM, okay? NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide. That activates the sirtuin genes. Sirtuin genes 1, 6, and 7, they're in the nucleus, dramatically helps improve DNA repair. Another compound we use from a vine from South America, AC11. We give this to all our people. Repairs both single-strand, double-strand DNA breaks, cuts inflammation. So those are some of the compounds we have. Senolytics. What are senolytics? Things that remove the senescent cells. Fisetin, quercetin, dasatinib, which is a prescription medication used at very low doses. That triple combination has been shown to very efficiently remove your senescent cells without any significant side effects at all. Now, senostatics, what does that mean? Senostatics are compounds that will ratchet down the gene that makes senescent cells. So our focus is to slow the production and to get rid of the numbers. Now, senostatics are what? They're compounds that are basically based on a compound called rapamycin. And there's analogs we use that have been approved for human use, but you won't hear about them in the US because they're categorized as anti-cancer drugs or drugs to be used in metastatic disease, but at a much lower dose, they do dramatic things. Okay. Collect and store all 3 stem cell types. Well, as I said, 7 years ago, you couldn't even do it. Now that we're doing it, no one even looks at what we're doing, which is good. We're out of the country. But more importantly, this is one of the most important things, I think, from an aging point of view, that nature has shown is one of the most powerful things to do, is to keep your immune system strong, your blood vessels in good health, and basically your whole system, regenerative system in general, works better. Okay. Now, this is the big thing. The future of anti-aging medicine, personalized medicine, will be exactly what this is. Just like David is doing his research on these the new genes that are involved in aging. Okay, time-wise? Yep. All of this is coming to a head to create what we're all going to experience as an amazing next decade. So technologies to measure and treat the aging process, we have to be able to measure and show results. We use these testing and these different tests in order to document what's going on so we can edit programs for people and personalize them. Epigenetic testing, DNA damage testing, they're home test kits now. You do it at home in 5 minutes and you send it in. Your hormonal and neurotransmitter levels, it's a little urine sample in the morning, a home test kit. A year and a half ago, none of this was available. Your inflammatory markers, your blood testing for your organ systems, will still have to be done in a lab. And the physical biomarkers we look at are basically done in an office setting. So these new technologies basically are allowing us to control what we give to patients and how you're aging. And we're basically looking at aging from the macro to the micro level. Okay? So what does a test report look like when this is all done? It's all compiled into an actual personal program. And this is done about 4 times a year, where we look at, actually it's about 32 pages, and with a team of physicians, 4 other physicians, we all sit down and we look at what can we do from nutrition, from exercise, from the hormonal levels, all the way down to create an ideal personalized program. So here, you're going to see the Oura Ring. Now, the Oura Ring is an amazing tool to help us look at, as David said, sleep, the amount of REM, deep sleep. We usually get this from the patients once a month. We look at their track. If they're not sleeping and getting deep sleep, what do? Well, we recommend some 5-HTP, which gets converted to serotonin and then into melatonin in your body. Or we'll give them extra GABA. So this gives us data that helps alter their programs. The Lumen is a brand new device that you blow in the morning. It'll tell you how you're metabolizing your carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. It'll actually help you plan your meals. This is where it's going in the next year or 2. Wearable tattoos that will send us so much data we don't even know what to do with yet. And in the very near future, they'll all be implantable. So for 24/7, we'll know how you're aging. I'm almost done. Bear with me. Two more slides. So David also mentioned this, and frankly, he didn't see my presentation, and I didn't see his, but this shows you how we think together very similarly. Aging is a lifelong process, okay? And prevention before you have the onset of all these age-related diseases is so important. So when should that happen? Well, let's go back to something I said earlier. Your DNA repair mechanisms, okay? The key thing to keep your genetic software working optimally start to falter in your 30s, mid to late 30s. So late 30s to 40s is when you need to start to be proactive, because the more damage you accumulate, the harder it is to reset your organ system to a higher level of efficiency and function. So that's really the big thing. So, but even if you've missed the ideal time to collect your cells, collecting them in your 50s and 60s still allows you to keep your number of stem cells elevated, and it still allows us to decrease your senescent cells. So the secret here is to start to look at healthy lifestyles early on, and don't let the ship be half sunken before you decide to try to save it. Again, mindset can make a major difference. Okay, and now that we know aging is a disease and we can focus on different things, we know that stress is the most detrimental thing to aging in general. Cortisol is the age-accelerating hormone. DHA is the anti-aging hormone, and melatonin is the synchronizing hormone. A study I did for 1 week with 15 adults, 1 week meditating, 15 adults, they changed their baselines to 200 to 300%. Higher with DHEA and melatonin, and lower with cortisol. No medications, no supplements. Stress, mindset, being in the moment is essential. So let me finish up. So in the past, the Wright brothers challenged the concept, the idea, held for thousands of years, that human beings would never fly. So what happened in 1903? We flew. Less than a generation later, we challenged the concept that we could go to another planet. No one believed that. And President Kennedy pushed that through, and a few years later, we planted the flag on the moon. Today we're manifesting one of the things that humanity has looked for since the beginning of time: living longer and staying younger. So the Wright brothers showed that humanity could take the first steps to fly. And frankly, we're at the point where we're taking the first steps to show that we can not only slow, but we can reverse the aging process. How many people recognize this phrase? My last slide. Come on, no one knows Star Trek? Thank you. Well, I was a Star Trekkie, and what's interesting is science fiction predicts the science of the future. There are a few of us who consider ourselves adventurous clinicians and scientists. David's also definitely in that category. And you heard, basically, we actually stand on the frontier of what is known, but what is not fully grasped. Technology is advancing so quickly, and you saw a few examples of this, that it's allowed us to go far beyond what our normal senses have allowed us to see over the last couple of decades. And the real secret is this: the future is going to be amazing, because every 2 to 3 months, what we know about aging doubles. Every 2 to 3 months. 5 years from now, the amount of information we're going to have is beyond comprehension. Without a question, we're going to be able to extend our lives, improve the quality of our health, way beyond what we can even imagine at the moment. The goal is to be proactive now so that you stay healthy to enjoy what's coming in the future. So, how many of you still want to have an extra decade or two of enhanced function and health? How many of you want to be able to think faster and quicker for the next couple of decades? So the real question to ask yourselves is, what does that mean to you? What is that worth to you? Okay? So right now, to coin a phrase, we can now go where no one else has gone before. Thank you, guys. Quick questions?
First things first. Any questions for Dr. Giampapa? Yeah. Right here. We bring the mic. There you go. Aaron?
So what you're primarily talking about with the stem cell research is taking your own stem cells and reusing them. What are your thoughts with the stem cell therapies that you can get in the United States that aren't your stem cells?
Yeah, so there's a purpose. Let me make a comment on that. The stem cells that are being done in the U.S. that they're not the patient's own stem cells, usually umbilical cord stem cells, expanded. These are very, very potent anti-inflammatory compounds. They actually do help in general, cutting inflammation, which is a major feeder to chronic diseases of aging. They're used fantastically for ligaments, joints, cartilage problems. If you notice, there's been major sports people go out of the country for this because you can't get it electively here. So yes, umbilical cord stem cells have their place. There's a whole host of other types of cell therapy. See, at RMI, we do internal epigenetics with our medications, with our lifestyles, and we do external cell therapy, and we bring them together for the maximum benefit we feel we can get. But yes, but to do what we do here, and we're just now looking at doing this with Harvard, exactly what I showed you in a formal study with humans, it's very difficult.
Outstanding. Thank you, Aaron. Great question. Question right here?
Yeah. The box.
Hi.
Hi.
So with a person who has a cancer history, but it was like a tumor that was fully removed, and so, no cancer post that, no treatment.
Yeah.
Is there a risk for them getting stem cell treatment
Good
intravenous?
question.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So, one of the things that you get cancer, why you get cancer, as I was explaining, if your hematopoietic stem cells are very, very low, your immune system can't fight off specific type of cancers. If it's a blood-borne cancer, we use a therapy called NK cell therapy, which has been shown to dramatically reduce blood-borne cancers. Now, once you get a cancer, the reason you get cancers are there's other conditions inside your body. It's like having a garden with tons of weeds, right? You got to rip out the weeds, you're going to come back, no matter what. So people who've had cancer, we want to decrease their inflammation, get rid of their senescent cells, which are a prelude to cancer. We want to make sure that their stem cell numbers are up in all of these areas to make sure their immune system's functioning. But frankly, we don't take anyone who's had cancer unless they, for a minimum of 2 years of remission, and they have to have a letter from their oncologist saying that they can have their stem cells, their own, nobody else's, their own stem cells collected and utilized as a preventive measure. Yeah.
It's a really good question. Right next to you. Pasha, you.
You mentioned earlier that you give your patients about 200 million stem cells. I had last year previously done 10 million. I don't know if that was...
What type of stem cells were they?
See, I couldn't answer that.
You had them give you stem cells, you even know what type they were?
Well, he mentioned to me, I just forgot. I went there, They collected our stem cells.
What clinic, where did you go, Mexico?
Yes,
Okay,
to a place called
there is
Giampapas.
no other clinic in the world that gives you all 3 stem cell types back. So I'm sure what they did is they took some fat.
Yes.
Okay, so you got your mesenchymal stem cells, which are anti-inflammatory, help with regenerative potential. That's good. But that's like getting an ice cream sundae with 1 scoop of vanilla ice cream instead of 3 scoops in the cherries and cream. So bottom line is, it's good, but that's not where the state of the art is right now. And you didn't hurt you, and it probably helped you from an inflammation point of view. But you have to understand, information is the key thing that we look at. We look at articles, 50 articles a month. How can we keep up with the latest trends that are safe? And once people start clinics, it's hard for them to change things.
We're going to go over to Scott, and then we're going to have Dana talk a little bit. And then we'll go to Tracy, and then we'll have Dana talk a little bit about...
So I'm familiar with the process where they pull the adipose fat and then do the mesenchymal stem cells. Will you go through the process, how intrusive it is if we were to come down to Costa Rica?
I'll take 2 seconds to do that real quick.
Yeah, how about it?
So to collect stem cells, the protocol we use is we don't just collect them. They're your first treatment also.
Okay.
So for 8 days prior to something coming down, we give you 5 days of the senolytics. They wipe out the senescent cells.
Yeah.
We give you 3 days following that at home with a tiny little micro needle that you inject this side one day, this side another, this another. That's a mobilizing agent. That releases billions of stem cells from your bone marrow.
Wow.
Those cells are now going through your body, repairing, restoring, and everything. But we take advantage of that at the same time because we have you come down the day after that's done, and we collect billions and billions of them. All 3 of the stem cell types. They go into cryopreservation at minus 180 degrees centigrade. They're not aging anymore. You are. They're not.
Yeah.
So that yearly we will give you back those cells, okay, based upon usually about 100 or 200 million a year.
Perfect.
Collected through apheresis.
Yes,
There's
they're
an IV in each arm. It's not your
Perfect.
And then just real fast follow up is
question
not
for
to
Tracy.
discuss the sordid topic of coin,
Yeah.
but how much does it cost?
We're getting there, Scott. You're leading the witness.
She'll handle that. I honestly,
Tracy Osborne, last
That's not
question
my-
to you.
one more question? No?
Sorry, we saved our kids'
Yeah.
stem cells, or their blood cord.
Yeah.
Do they still need to go in when they're 21 to?
So this is, like, I have my grandchildren's cord blood saved. You know that you can collect and store your children's stem cells from the cord. You can't use them in the U.S. They're not allowed to be given back. Why? You have to talk to the administration about that. So the question is, what do you do with them? So from those cells, believe it or not, you could even use those cells. Okay, those cells are immunologically negative. Okay, so anyone could use those cells, and your children. But unfortunately, at this moment, the government says no, you can't give them back unless you're in a research study. So that's the only thing I can tell you at the moment. Yeah.
Outstanding. Okay, so Dana, here's what I
Good.
want to do. I want you to kind of give some context to the conversations that we've had and what the special offer is for everyone within GoBundance and as part of this conference.
Okay, absolutely. Hey,
Let
everybody.
you finish.
All right, so what you have or what we have out in the little lobby is a brochure called Regenesis Life. So what we've done is we've put together a program specific to GoBundance. This hasn't been offered to Tiger. This hasn't been offered to anybody else. It is a membership type of agreement where the value is $85,000 and we've dropped it to $59,500. And we set it up to where instead of having it due all at once, it's just a $10,000 upfront deposit and then it's a monthly payment of $4,500. And what you get is, the value is $85,000. So 4 stem cell infusions a year. That's 2 umbilical, 2 of your own autologous. It includes the collection, it includes the senescent cell removal, the mobilization, the bioceuticals, all of the testing at baseline, 6-month, 12-month, an Aura ring, Illumit, everything, nutritional coaching, every single thing you can possibly think of because longevity is a puzzle. There's no one piece that's more important than the other. Lifestyle is obviously the most, but it is a puzzle. So we've put all the components together so that way you can optimize your lifespan and your health span.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding. So the great news is we talked earlier about the importance of us spending time together as couples. So my understanding is you've set up a limited number of slots to go down to Costa Rica starting early part of next year.
No, not starting early part of next year. I would say starting in March.
Starting
So
in March?
We only have 30 couples spots available.
Okay.
Because the discount on the program is so high that we couldn't do more than that.
Thank you. Okay, 30 couples, that's the limit. The good news is I just visited with my friends at American Airlines. They will continue to offer the special GoBundance pricing for any of the couples that sign up for this and then use American Airlines to go down to Costa Rica to get the stem cell process and program officially rolled out.
And just so you know, the process, you'll be in Costa Rica for about 3 days or so. So you can fly in on a Monday, you collect, we infuse, we do some testing, and you can usually fly out Wednesday evening or Thursday morning. So you're not there super long.
And Dana, you will have all that information
I will.
back there. You'll
I
be
will.
able to answer questions,
Yes.
anything and everything
Yes.
that they want, they'll be able to
Yes,
provide.
and Dr. Federico Ugalde will be with me. He's been in this industry for the last 14 years. He was at Riordan's in Panama. We also have a Panama clinic. So yes, we'll answer all those questions.
Outstanding. Okay, what do we think of Dr. Giampapa and Dana?